Florida has the second highest mortgage delinquency rates in the country this past quarter. Only the state of Nevada was worse. Now, there is a glimmer of hope, however. The delinquency rate isn't going up as much as it had in previous months. However, as you know, and if you're watching today, people are still losing their homes in record numbers. There's still a crisis in many of your neighborhoods. People still complain their banks are not working with them to save their homes, to do workout. So you've no doubt been hearing about different programs, different tax incentives to rescue homeowners, but which ones might really help you? Joining us today and back again, are always glad to have her, Shari Olefson, Florida Bar Certified Real Estate Attorney with Fowler, White & Boggs, and an educator, recognized expert in the current mortgage crisis. She is the author of an excellent book called Foreclosure Nation, and every time she's here, the phones and the emails ring off the hook because you have some answers. People are really very confused, so Shari, always good to have you back. I want to know, first of all, I want to ask you about the foreclosure rate and Florida being so high. Is it still the crisis level that it was, or is it leveling off? What are you seeing?
Well, the foreclosure statistics are one of those numbers that we look at, and here in Florida, our numbers are still much higher than the national average. The numbers are going up and down, though, and for a while, it seemed that it was getting less severe, but we're seeing a new wave of foreclosures now. What began in the subprime mortgages, borrowers who had those types of mortgages having trouble paying, has now extended really into what's called the Alt-A mortgages, which are higher-priced homes, and jumbo mortgages, and now the option arm mortgages. We're expected to see $30 billion worth of option arm mortgages have interest rates that adjust over the next 2 years, meaning those payments that were maybe based on 2 or 3% interest are going to jump up to potentially 5, 6, or 7% interest, and those homeowners are going to have a really hard time affording those payments.
So let's talk a little bit about this second wave that we're seeing. The first wave, obviously, the people in the ARMs and the subprime market and people who were in homes they couldn't afford. Now, the second wave, I've been reading about people who had jobs, conventional mortgages, and then they lose their job or something happens, and these are people who are pretty stable and now are falling behind and losing their homes. How big is this second wave we're talking about?
It's significant. It's very significant. And part of the problem is that, of course, the Obama administration is trying to come up with new programs to help people, but as we're addressing problem A, problem B, C, and D are expanding. And so it's really a catch-up process. But we've seen it in changes to the Making Home Affordable program, which right now, the HAMP modification, which hopefully some of our homeowners will look to help save their own homes that way, has been tweaked to increase the ceiling, to allow for more negative equity, to allow to protect tenants. We're looking for other solutions as we go.
Okay, so what is this HAMP then, the Home Affordable Modification Program? How does that work?
Well, essentially, a homeowner who is in imminent danger of losing their home can ask their lender about this program. Actually, 47 of the servicers, the nation's servicers, are using this now. So supposedly it covers about 80 or 90% of the mortgages in this country. Can ask their lender for assistance with that. And what will happen is the lender will work to see if, based on your income, they can reduce your payment to about ultimately 31% of your monthly take-home income. So they're looking to make that payment affordable. And that's a process that the lender goes through with you. It's very important for viewers to make sure that you get your lender all of the paperwork when they ask for it, because that can delay the process. We've heard problems with lenders losing paperwork. Don't be discouraged by that. I've heard viewers have called in, lenders have lost paperwork 2 or 3 times, but eventually they'll get it together, and a lot of those are being approved. We've got about 500,000 modifications that are in a temporary trial period. They'll do a 3-month period first to make sure that you can keep up with the payments, and hopefully those will come through. The administration is expecting 3 to 4 million homeowners will save their homes that way in the next 2 or 3 years.
So does this mean that every time we do these shows and people call or email and say, I can't get anybody on the phone, they won't work with me, I'm having trouble even getting a person to talk to say, hey, can I modify? Is that changing? Are you seeing a shift?
That's changing. The servicers, that's a great question, because that's the catch-22. And, in my practice, I represent banks sometimes too, and there are 2 sides to every story, and the banks are really having a hard time. The servicers are in a grumpy mood when you talk to them sometimes because they're just overwhelmed. So we have to remember the human element here on both sides of the story. But the big change here in Florida, which is important to know about, is the mandatory mediation. A lot of our judicial circuits, meaning different areas in the state of Florida, are beginning to require that lenders try to mediate a problem like this before they move forward in their foreclosure litigation, meaning that if you live in one of those judicial circuits, you will be getting a phone call and letters from your lender trying to set up a mediation. Now, at that mediation...
Now, who sits down at the table at this mediation?
Good question, good question. This is not a court of law. A mediation is sort of a coming together. It's almost an ambassador, the mediator's role. And a homeowner is welcome to bring an attorney there, or they can show up, you know, pro se on their own without an attorney. The lender has to send someone, usually their attorney, who's qualified to discuss the matter with them, and they have to make sure that if that person can't make a decision on your loan at the table, that they have someone available by phone who will be on a speakerphone who can make that decision for you. Actually, at our website, which is foreclosurenationthebook.com, we have a lot of information on mediation, so if a homeowner is going to be going to mediation, they can read that information and be comfortable ahead of time.
What kind of person is going to be successful in a mediation? What do you have to say or prove or do that would make them say, okay, we're going to modify this loan. We think you can pay it off eventually.
Right. Well, there are HAMP modifications, which are the government programs, and there are other types of modifications which depend on the lender. That's up to the lender to decide what they want to do. But it's really important to remember that the government's initiatives here are not designed to help people who can pay their mortgage and just want to get, just want to save some money. These are designed to help people who really can't afford to pay their mortgage. On the other hand, they're not designed to help people who just can't afford to pay their mortgage at all. And this is something that's important for viewers to remember, that if you can't afford to live in your home, then no matter how much you love it, it is not your dream home. It may be someone else's dream home, but you have to be able to afford to live there for these programs to work.
So this would be maybe someone who had their, like maybe one spouse lost their job but not the other, or they have a shift in income to where they can pay less, but they can make a monthly payment, in other words.
Right, and one of the things you need to do in terms of the paperwork is show that. So you're going to need to go through a process that's very similar to when we originally apply for our home mortgages. We have to produce tax returns, we have to produce pay stubs, we have to show what our monthly expenses are, and the lender will calculate that to make sure that we can afford to pay the mortgage.
Okay, when you say this is mandatory mediation, who gets to call, yes, you get to go through this mandatory mediation?